webinar for March 2015. We're going to be covering two things tonight. One is, well, actually three things. We're going to be covering the new update and how you're going to get it. We're going to be covering some differences between MDQII and the original MDQ. And we're also going to be showing you a little applique technique. So we're kind of breaking with our normal form and not showing you a completed project. But we're just going to show you a quick little applique technique, and in the process of doing that, we're going to highlight some of the new features. So hopefully, once we talk about them and you see them in action, it'll bring it all home for you. So before we get started, I always like to show you what the end project is going to look like, but we don't actually have an end project, but this is what the end applique is going to look like. We're going to use a bird outline and put an advanced stippling stitch in and turn it into an applique. So this is what it's going to end up looking like. But we're going to go ahead and get started with the software portion. I'm going to go ahead and start up the new MDQII. And it's not starting. Hold on one second. This happens sometimes with the webinar software. I apologize. There it goes. And this is the new splash screen that comes up. When it comes up, you're going to see the My Floriani Club page, the My Floriani Today page. So you're familiar with most of the stuff that's over here. It's pretty much the same as MDQ. This is where you would go to enter the club. And I'm going to actually go enter the club right now because we're going to talk about the club for a bit. There's two things we need to cover. One is the new update that's coming. It's going to be released sometime next week. And in order to get that update, you're not going to get a disk. You're actually going to have to go sign into the club and download your update. And when you do that, you'll also be given your serial number at the same time. So you're going to download your new update and write down your serial number, and you're going to enter that into the software once you install it. Just like FTCU, if you're used to that program, this will not overwrite your MDQ, so that old program will stay there and stay functional, but you will also now have a second program on there, which will be the MDQ2. You're going to have to sign in. Now, before I sign in, I just want to scroll down a little bit because I'm going to show you this webinar here. We did this webinar live a week or so ago from Oklahoma City, actually. Walter and DJ and I were on tour, and what was the very first release introduction to MDQ2. We did a live webinar there. And if you want to find out a lot of the new features and cool things about MDQ2, I suggest you come back and take a look at this webinar. We're not going to be covering a lot of that tonight because we're just going to be going over the differences. So if you're used to MDQ2, great. This webinar tonight will be perfect for you. If you're not, come here first and take a look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in because I want to show you something that's new about the way you download the projects. Now, you come here to this Monthly Projects tab. Click that. If you have FTCU, you're going to see this free monthly design. So these are the free monthly designs that come with FTCU. If you also have MDQ2 or if you just have MDQ, you will see this second part of the screen here, which is where you would install the current month's project. And you'd want to come here to get both the fabric sample that we're going to be using tonight in the project, along with the printed instructions on how to do the software portion and the assembly portion. So you want to click right here to install current month's project. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because we've changed the procedure that happens a little bit. So you click that. Most browsers are going to come down here and show you the download. It's downloading pretty quick. So it's done. Once it's downloaded, you click on it to open it. You'll see a folder where you'll see the file currentproject.exe. Go ahead and double-click that to run it. It's going to ask you if it's okay to install the current project. You want to say okay. This is brand new. You're going to see this WinZip self-extractor screen here. And the reason this is now here is because a lot of the antivirus software was upset about the fact that it just went ahead and installed without asking you a second time. What you want to do is go ahead and click Unzip. When you do that, it's going to unzip those files successfully. Go ahead and click OK. You can click out of here, and click out of here. And what we'll have done is put the files in your MDQ projects folder just like it did for MDQ. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water here. And I'm going to go ahead and close out of the club. I'm going to click Create a New Design. So that's the first thing you want to do when you start up your software, of course, is create a new design, or you can open a design or whatever. But let's go over some of the major differences. If you have FTCU, you'll notice that the screen looks very, very similar. And that's because we want people who have both to be familiar with both interfaces, so they look very similar. If you're used to MDQ2, you'll remember that after these two icons here, kind of hiding in, or not hiding, but in between here, there was a whole bunch of icons that we called the convert to icons. So this is where you were able to, with a single click, convert from one stitch type to another or from artwork to a stitch type. It was very, very convenient. In fact, we liked it so much, we took that same functionality and we built it into FTCU. And we, at the same time, moved those icons, because in FTCU there's just a ton of them. We moved them down here to the bottom. Now, at the moment, they're not lit up, but those icons are now relocated down here. So if you're used to FTCU, you already know that the one-click icons are down here. If you aren't, this is where they are now. They're down here. They're not missing. In fact, we've added a couple more. And we're going to light those up and take a look at them in just a second. One thing I want to show you is our new color palette. Now, in order to do that, I am actually going to have to show you the new design library. So this is new too. Again, those of you that are familiar with FTCU, this is going to be old news to you, but people who have just used MDQ, this is going to be a little confusing at first, so I'm going to show it to you. Your design library used to be down here in the sequence view. So you would alternate back and forth between the design library and the sequence view. That's no longer the case. They're over here in these three tabs. You've got three tabs sticking in: Browser, Library, and Designs. Now, to activate those tabs, the best way to do it is simply hover over them. So I'm just going to hover over the library. Don't click. I know you want to click, but don't do it. Just hover over it, and you'll see a pop-up of your folders of your design library. Now, this is exactly the same design library you had before, whether it's a shared library for all of your programs or if it's just for MDQ, it'll still be the same. And so what you do is you come down, for example, right here to MDQ project. I'm going to open that. I'm going to go to our March, and I'm going to go to March 2015. Now, if you start clicking or double-clicking down here and you expect another window to open so you can see your designs, that's not what happens, and that's what takes getting a little used to. So you select your folder here first. Once you've got the folder you want to look at first, then you come over here and you hover over Designs, and boom, you'll see the designs in that folder. So here's the bird applique that we're going to be working on. I'm going to go ahead and bring that in. I'm going to turn it into 3D so you can see the advanced stippling stitches a little better. So once you've done that, boom, you've got your design in here. Now let's go back over here for a second, because there's a brand new tab. Before in the design library, you were pretty much limited to seeing your design library. Now we've given you a new browser tab, which lets you browse anywhere you would like to in your system. So any of your hard disks, USB drives, jump drives, network, you name it, you can see it over here in the browser window. Again, once you've clicked a folder over here and you've selected it, then you would come over to your Designs tab to actually see the designs. Important thing is don't click on these tabs, because if you do, they might screw up. So just come over here, come into your Designs, and then you can click and drag your design into the window. So once we've done that, now you can see our new thread palette. In MDQ, you had a palette that showed you the colors in the design. If you wanted to add a new color to the design, you had to click over here and click Add New Color. If you wanted to change a color in the design, you had to left-click on it, which brought up a new window that showed you the color palette. Now we've got a brand new interface. If you're used to FTCU, again, this will be very familiar because it's the same. But down here we've got all the colors that are available to you in the thread chart that you've got selected. You can scroll through them a screen at a time like this. You can go the other way by clicking over here. You can go a color at a time, forwards or backwards, just by simply clicking these two buttons right here. This shows you the currently selected color. This is really cool. This lets you find a color. So if I want to come here and, for example, click Find, I could type in yellow and click Find, and it would bring up yellow right here. If I want to change my thread chart, I do that right here with Select Thread Chart. So I have all these thread charts to choose from. I'm just going to reselect Floriani Poly, and this is my default thread chart. So again, I can scroll through here. These are the threads that are actually in the design. So you can see I've got 3 colors here. They're numbered 1, 2, and 3. And this is actually the sequence that they would sew out in. If I want to temporarily or permanently add some colors to this design so that I can have them up here, should I want to add them to the actual thread, I can do that simply by finding a color down here. Like, let's go ahead and go over here to this pink flesh color. If I right-click on it, I can click Add to Design Palette, and that color comes in here. So now it's convenient for me to add it into my design. Notice that it doesn't have a number assigned to it yet. That's because right now it's just like a placeholder for that color. It's not actually assigned to anything in the design. So if I were to add a design element, like, or let's just change the stippling to pink. If I select that stippling, actually it's selecting everything. Let me ungroup it. If I were to actually select that stippling, I could change it to pink simply by left-clicking now on that color. And how nice is that, that now I can just left-click. I'm no longer confused by a right-click. So that's a great new innovation that's in MDQII. So one other thing I want to show you is a couple new tools. In order to do that, I'm going to bring in a backdrop. So I'm going to grab a new piece of paper, and I'm going to use my backdrop tool, and I'm going to select a backdrop. So let me just select this Fancy Fans backdrop here and bring that in. So it's going to bring that in. I don't know if this is going to be fat enough. Let me actually bring in a different backdrop. Let me go ahead and right-click and say Load Backdrop. And I'm just going to bring in a different backdrop. I'm going to use this Friendship Blossom here. I'm going to bring that in, and I'm going to resize it. Now, this is pretty much the same as it's been in the past. What's different is that down here in MDQ, we had to hide the backdrop icon. That's no longer there. We've replaced it by having you right-click on the backdrop. If you want to turn it off, you uncheck Show Backdrop. To bring it back, all you do is click on your backdrop icon again. Now, I brought in this backdrop. Let me just make it a little bit bigger because I want to show you a cool new tool that's in MDQII that was not in MDQ. It's the Red Work tool. It's right here. And what this does is it takes an image that's loaded as a backdrop, allows you to click on it, and it is going to find a line and trace that with stitches to create a red work design. Now, if I use the magic wand, I could trace this, but it would do 2 things. Number one, it would trace both sides of it, so it would outline this on both sides of the black. Not what I want for red work. And furthermore, it would result in artwork. If I use the Red Work tool, it's actually going to result in stitches, and it's going to trace along the center of this black area. So I'm going to come into the black right here, and I'm going to click, and it's going to add a Red Work design in there. And to hide my backdrop, again, I'm going to come back to my selection tool. I'm going to click my backdrop. I'm going to right-click and uncheck Show Backdrop. Let me go to 3D. And you can see I've got a beautiful red work design in there. And if you were to watch the stitch, you would just see how beautiful the pathing is. And this would be a stitchable red work design with just a few clicks. And how cool is that? Okay, so that's a brand new tool that's in the red work tool, and I showed you how the backdrop is different. I'm going to show you a couple of other new things. I'm going to go ahead and get a new design page. I want to show you this tool right here. This is our new custom shapes tool. If you click this, you're going to get a lot of built-in artwork shapes. We're going to use this later to create our applique out of the bird. Here's the bird we're going to use. Right now I'm going to bring in the bear. So I've got a bear, and that's actually artwork. It's not stitches. I know it looks kind of like a steel stitch, but if you look over here, the pen width is set to 2 millimeters. This is also new. You can set the pen width of your artwork to give it a little fatter look. It really doesn't change a whole heck of a lot. But in order to show you this next feature, I've shown you the custom artwork. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a couple copies of this bear. So I'm going to click copy, and I'm going to paste 1 and 2 bears. I'm going to move one of those copies over here to the right, and I'm going to move it over there. I'm going to select another copy of the bear, and I'm going to move it over here. Now I'm purposefully going to not align those very well because I want to show you a couple things. One is if I select them all, and I'm going to use Edit Select All for that. If I align them, I had alignment tools in the old software, but the interface looks a little different now. Instead of taking up a lot of screen real estate with all the alignment tools, instead I've got a little drop down here. So if I click that, here's my alignment tools. So I'm going to align them vertically. So if I click that, boom, now they're all aligned. But they're not spaced out very well. They're not distributed evenly across the design. So I'm going to show you a couple new tools that we have. That is our distribute horizontally and distribute vertically. These two new tools allow you to actually space these out perfectly. What it's going to do is it's going to use, in the case of this horizontal distribution, it's going to use the left bear and the right bear. And if I had 15 or 20 bears, it would still use the left and right, and anything in between, it would space them out accordingly. Now I just have 3 here, so it's going to show you what happens. So if I have them all selected, I'm just going to click the distribute horizontally, and it's going to move that center bear so that the spacing between the bears is all perfect now. So that's the distribution tools, and again, those are new in MDQII. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete 2 of my bears, and I'm going to delete the outside one. So I'm going to delete that bear, and I'm going to delete that bear. So now I'm just left with 1 bear. Let me zoom in so you can see him a little better, because what I'm going to do now is show you a really cool feature. If you look over here in our sequence view, you can see that this is an artwork bear. So I've just got the 1 bear here. Now, at the bottom, you can see that my Convert To icons are now lit up. So I could click a texture fill, I could click auto stippling, I could click advanced stippling, I could do a contour fill, a shape echo fill, I could convert this to a run stitch, a motif stitch, a steel stitch, an applique, apple stitch, or back to artwork. Now in MDQ and also in FTCU, if I were to click one of these, it would literally convert this bear, for example, into stipple stitches. And what that means is that it would actually replace the artwork with the stippling stitches. So the artwork would be gone. If I wanted to use that artwork somewhere else in the design, or I wanted to use it to create, say, a border around my stippling, then I would have to know in advance I want to do that and create a copy of my artwork so I would have it around. The way MDQII works now is actually very, very cool. When I'm using artwork, these are no longer convert tos, they are actually copy tos. So for example, if I click auto stippling right now, it's going to create that stipple pattern in there. Now let me turn on 3D so you can see the thread. It's created that stipple pattern within the bear, and it has left my artwork behind. So for example, if I wanted to now make a steel stitch around that bear for a border, I could reselect my artwork and I could click the steel stitch. So now I've got a steel stitch around there and my artwork is still here. So I can continue to do more things with that artwork or I could make an applique out of it. I can do all kinds of things with it. But what's really, really cool about having my artwork left behind is I can now apply fabric to that artwork. So I can come here and I could, for example, click this brown velvet to go with my bear, and I've added that in. So now whatever I do, if I don't like those stippling stitches, I can actually delete them, and I've still got my fabric applied to my artwork. So again, if I wanted to put in, say, a texture fill into my bear, I could do that. Now I've got texture stitches in my bear, but my artwork has stayed behind along with my fabric. So I don't have to keep reapplying the fabric to the fill stitch. And that's a really, really cool feature, and you're going to see that applied when we do our bird applique. One of the other things I want to show you is the new interface for how you load in a block and how you load in an embellishment. So let me grab a new design window. When you used to click select a block, it would come up, and over here in this area, it would show you a long list of all the folders that were available, and over here it would show you the preview of the blocks. This is now changed to where there's a drop down up here. So for example, if I want to click kaleidoscope blocks, it shows me kaleidoscope blocks. If I want to click flowers, it shows me flower blocks. If I want to click flying geese, it shows me the flying geese blocks. So this is just a little bit different in the way it works from MDQ, and it works kind of the same with the embellishments. The embellishments are still the same concept. We've got various categories you can choose from, but picking the categories, for example, feathers, now gives you a lot more feathers, but it's from this drop-down box instead of having a list of folders over here. So that's just a little bit different. Other than that, everything is still the same. One other thing that's new is the way we handle circle text. We always had text on a circle in MDQ, but in MDQ2 we do it just a little bit differently. So we're going to go ahead and click on our text tool, and if I go ahead and put text in here right now, it would put straight line text. And then in MDQ, I would have to come over here to my properties box and change the type to circle. In MDQ2, got a little bit more convenient way to do it. I can simply click the down arrow and click circle text instead. And now if I come down here and click, it's going to put the circle text in directly. If I want to ever change this from circle text back to regular text, normally in MDQ I would have done this over here. In MDQ2, now I simply right-click on it and select normal frame. So I can go to normal text, back to circle text, etc. by right-clicking on the text and choosing the frame style instead. If you have FTCU, again, this works exactly the same. So I've showed you how to hide the backdrop, and I've shown you how to bring it back. I've got a couple more things I want to show you. We'll go ahead and use this text as an example. Let me enlarge it. And let's look over here in the sequence view. We've always had the ability to hide elements by clicking on the little eyeball. So if you click on the eyeball, it would go away. But sometimes you want to see just the faintest version of it so you can tell where it is, so you can align things to it, but you don't want to accidentally click and affect it. So hiding it was good, and in the old MDQ, you would right-click over here and select shadow what was hidden. But that's no longer there. So if you try that, it's not going to work. Instead, we have a new mode called Ghost Mode. And that's right here. You got this cute little ghost icon. If I go ahead and click that, it's going to bring up everything that was hidden and make it ghosted out. It's still hidden, but you can see it in a very, very light gray, so it won't affect anything. So that's Ghost Mode. Quickly, I'm going to show you how we change the background color. This used to be done down here. Now it's up here as an icon, and we have one other option for you too. I'm going to go ahead and click it. You can choose color, or you can choose fabric. So now you can actually set your whole screen to look like fabric, and that's a pretty cool thing as well. If you want to change the color, click there. I'm just going to cancel it so it actually doesn't change my screen color. one more thing I want to show you that's new, and that's the way we select and view the hoops. We always had a view the hoop icon here, and that hasn't changed. So if I go ahead and select view the hoop, I'm going to show my hoop here. I'm going to go ahead and unhide that text so you can see that it's in there. So I'm going to go ahead and click the eyeball. Okay, so now my text is in the hoop there. Before, if you wanted to actually select a different hoop, you had to come up to the View menu and do Select Hoop. And one of the issues with MDQ was that it showed you every single hoop that was available every time you went to select a hoop. The new method is a little bit cooler. Actually, it's a lot cooler. We first of all have an icon for it. So you come over here and select Hoop. And now, over here you'll see there's a Format drop-down. That's really, really cool because it just simply shows you the hoops that are in the machine format you have. So if I, for example, select Jeff, which is the Janome format, it only is going to show me the hoops that are available for my Janome machine. If I go back to PES, it'll only show me the PES. Now you notice I've got a 100 millimeter round frame shown here. And if I look down, it's going to show cap frames and stuff. Those of you that have multi-needles are going to recognize these frames. Those of you that don't are going to be a little confused. That's because over here, I've got a multi-needle checkbox. If I check multi-needle, it's only going to show me those multi-needle frames, which are different than the non-multi-needle frames. So if I uncheck it, bingo. Now I've just got my normal PES frames, and I'm not bothered with the multi-needle frames. So this is a really, really cool feature. Let me just change to a different frame, for example, for you, and click OK, and you can see that that's a rectangular frame. And if I wanted to change that so that it was going the other way, I can click right here, rotate hoop by 90 degrees, and click OK. And now I can see it in a much better orientation for the text that I had. So those are basically the new features. There's actually quite a few more little things, but you will pick those up as you go through the software. But those are the major differences in the interface for now between MDQ and MDQ2. And we hope you love the new interface because once you get used to it, it's a really, really cool improvement over the other. So I'm going to go ahead and get a brand new design window. We're going to start our software instructions for the technique on how to create and manipulate appliques. And again, along the way, you're going to see a lot of these new features in action. So the first thing you do is do what I did, click New Design Window. You'll notice that the grid is on by default. If you don't like the grid, you can turn it off. But another new thing I want to point out to you is we've set the grid defaults in MDQ2 to be 1/4 inch, which is really, really useful for quilting. And it also defaults to inches. If you're not in inches for some reason, simply right-click on the ruler and select inches if you were in metric. So go ahead and do that. Another thing we want to do is make sure that Snap to Grid is turned off. So we're going to come here and just make sure that Snap to Grid is not checked. So just click off that. The other way to see that is go to Tools, go to Preferences, go to your grid box here, and make sure Snap to Grid is unchecked. You can also set up all your other grid settings here. If you're used to MDQ, you'll see there's a lot more grid settings than you used to. The new one is these grid majors. So the grid major lines are these purple lines that you see in my screen here, and you can set these up to be a relationship to this grid setting. So you can select anything you want. You can change your grid colors. It's very, very flexible. I'm going to cancel that because I'm going to leave this at the default. So the very next thing we're going to do is we're going to select our artwork to use. Again, we're going to use our Custom Shapes folder to do that. So clicking here brings up an artwork folder. I want you to click this bird. Now there's a lot of different birds to choose from. Just click the one that says bird all by itself. And when you do that, that's going to bring in the outline of this bird. Let me double click to make it a little bit bigger. And this is an artwork outline. Right now, nothing would stitch if we did something with this file. We're going to use that fabric feature, and I'm going to go ahead and click the fabric button right here, and I'm going to show you another cool feature. If you want to add fabric to the program, You can do it right here in the fabric window. So you can click Add, and with the download, you are going to get a sample swatch of fabric. And I'm going to actually navigate to where that is. So you go to Computer, go to your C drive, go to Floriani. It's in Designs, and you want to come down and find MDQ Projects, which is right here, MDQ Project. Find March 2015, and you'll see this file called samplefabric.jpg. Now, I've given you this as a sample to play with, but you can also go out to the manufacturer's websites and download their fabric swatches. You can also scan your own fabric if you have it, if you can't find it anywhere on the web. And any kind of a bitmap image will do. You can use a JPEG, a TIFF, PNG, GIF, all different kinds of those kinds of image files. And so I'm going to go ahead and click Open, and I'm going to select it, click Open. When I do that, it's going to add it to my palette of fabric. So if I come all the way down here to where it says Sample Fabric right here, you can see I've added that. To fill my shape with that, I'm going to click the fabric and click OK. And you can see now I've got a representation of what that fabric is going to look like in my bird, which is eventually going to become an applique. So the fabric I would choose for this would be my applique fabric. So that is step number 1, and we've shown you how to both add fabric to a shape and actually add new fabric to your fabric library. Next thing we're going to do is add our applique stitches, and that's super easy to do. We're just going to come right down here. Just make sure it should still be selected, but make sure your outline is still selected. Come down here to your one-click wonders is what we call them, your convert to app icons. Now remember, because we're using artwork, it's going to leave this artwork here along with our fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and click Applique, and bingo, right in there I've got my applique, just that easy with a single click. So I've added not only the satin stitch that you can see here, but I've also added a placement line and a tack down line. Now look over here in my properties box for that applique. I could change the type from satin to blanket if I wanted, so let me show you what that would look like. I can also change it to a motif, but I'm going to go back to satin and click Apply. It's a little bit easier to see. In fact, let me change to 3D mode so you can see a little bit better. Now, this looks blue because I've got it selected. I'm going to click off it so you can see what it looks like, and then I'm going to come back and select it again. Now, one thing that's also new right here is the ability for me to choose the parts of the applique that I actually want. So if I want a placement and a tack down, but I don't want any kind of a finishing stitch, I can click Apply. If I'm using Applique Wonder and I think I don't even need a tack down, I can uncheck that and click Apply. It would take those elements out. So it's a kind of a new feature as well that you can control your applique a little bit better. But we're not satisfied with this applique just the way it is, so I'm actually going to add some interest to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select my artwork one more time, not the applique, but the artwork, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to put some advanced stippling stitches in. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and you can see what happens when I do that is it's going to put in some advanced stippling. And you'll notice that it added those stitches over here, but it kept my artwork. Now we're going to change the advanced stipple pattern, and I'm going to change to advanced stipple 81. So I'm going to scroll down. Now just look at all these stippling patterns. We give you hundreds and hundreds of them, but I'm going to come up here to number 81, and I'm going to click that one. And if I wanted to, I could change my pattern size and my stitch length. That's kind of another new feature. The pattern size is independently controllable compared to the stitch width length. So I can make my pattern literally as big as I want and still keep my stitching nice and fine. So I'm going to go ahead and click Apply to change that pattern to this one. And I think I want to change the way that this pattern is running. I don't really want it to run kind of like that. I kind of want it to run a little bit more across the bird like this. So I can do that by changing what we now call the inclination lines, and they used to be called the angle lines, To get to them, you come up here with my pattern selected, come up here to my shape tool, click my shape tool, and you can now see I've got other controls. So I've got nodes out here that control my shape. I'm going to leave those alone. But you can see right here I've got a black dot. I've also got a black dot over here. It's kind of close to this green dot. The green dot is my start point, so that's where the stitching is going to start. My red dot is the stop of the stitching. And you can see that my green dot's kind of partially covering the black dot. So I have two options here. Because I can still kind of see that black dot, I can kind of come in from this way, and when I see my cursor add the black dot you just saw happen, now if I click, I'll actually select that black dot. And if I were to come in this way, you'd see now I've got the green dot. So I'd have to move around until I get the black dot. But every now and then in the design, you'll find that the green dot is actually covering something that you need, either a shape node or a start endpoint, or, for example, in this case, the inclination lines. If that were to happen, simply right-click on any of those, come to the Edit. Right now I'm seeing everything. Right now I just want to edit the inclination. So if I don't want to be bothered by other points, or I've got another point that's covering up what I want to get to, I can simply click what I'm interested in. So I'm going to click inclinations, and you'll see all the other points disappear except for those two. I'm going to actually click and drag this point up to about here, and then I'm going to take this one and bring it down to about here, and then when I click off of it, you'll see that my pattern direction changes to kind of go more in the direction of the bird. And you can play with that as much or as little as you want. Now, this is pretty much done the way it is, except we have one problem. You'll see, for example, up in here that my outline is on top of the satin stitch. So, excuse me, not my outline, my advanced stippling stitches are on top of the satin stitch, and I don't like the way that's going to look. I want to move these underneath. However, I don't want to move them underneath the whole applique, because then when I put my applique fabric down, I would cover them. So I need them to be between my placement and tack down lines and my finishing stitch, which is a satin stitch, on my applique. Now, that's kind of a problem, except for we give you the way to break up the applique. So to do that, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select my applique, and I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to select Break Up Applique. And when I do that, you can see here, here, and here, now I've got my placement line, my tack down line, and my finishing stitch all separated out. Now, a little anomaly in this version of the software, because this is a pre-release version, is that it put them at the end. That'll be fixed by the time you get your release, but I am going to manually move this in the sequence view to where it ought to have been, because this should have been at the end. So I'm going to drag it down to the end. Now we're in a place where this is still back on top. To move this to where it's between these two, we've got another new feature. And I'm going to go ahead and right-click on it, and I've got this Move menu item right here, and I'm just going to move it up one level. And when I do that, it's going to put it right between my tack down and my finishing stitch, which is just exactly where I want it. And now this is going to stitch out perfectly. And now all you would need to do is save your file. So you'd come up here to save, and that brings me to one new feature that we haven't discussed, and that is we've changed the file format for our internal editing format for MDQ. If you've been using FTCU, you know our new internal format is the new WAF format. We're doing the same thing in MDQ. We're using WAF, and that's on purpose so that we can share files between FTCU and MDQ2. So you want to save your file in the WAF format, and you can see I've already saved it here as birdapplique.waf, so I could click that and save it, and it would write it as a WAF file. But there isn't a machine in the world that can stitch a WAF file, So you would want to go ahead and then change your type to your machine format, and you have a bunch to choose from. Choose your machine format and click Save. Now while we're here, I want to point out that we've added some new formats. Primarily, we've added some new long arm quilter formats because this is not just for embroidery machines, but you can also stitch them out on your long arm quilter. One of the ones we were missing in MDQ that we've now been able to add is our Statler Stitcher or QLI format. So that's a big change from MDQ. So I'm not going to save this file because I've already saved it, so I'm just going to go ahead and cancel it. But you would go ahead and save it. Now, let's do something that highlights another new feature that we've added, and that is the ability to save files for the new automated cutters like the Brother Scan and Cut and the Silhouette cutters and the others that are like it. Now, one of the new things we've added is the ability to save a file directly to a Brother Scan and Cut compatible format. We also can save to SVG. We can also save to HBGL or PLT format. So I'm going to show you how you do that. Now, you don't want to save all of this stuff. You just want to save the artwork. Now, another cool thing about leaving this artwork behind is it's very easy now to send this to the cutter. So I don't even have to do anything special. If I come over here to File and Export Artwork, it's going to take that piece of artwork and it's going to give me the option of saving it as an SVG file, an HPGL or PLT file, and an FCM file. An FCM is your brother format. So if you wanted to save it for that, you'd choose that format, give it a name, and save it. So I'm not actually going to save it, but you would want to go ahead and save that file. Again, if you have different style of cutter, use either the PLT or SVG format. So we're just going to go ahead and assume that you've saved it. But let's assume right now you don't have a cutter. What if you don't have an automated cutter? You can do this applique as a traditional applique in the hoop, where you would stitch out your placement line, put down your fabric, and then you would stitch your tack down line, and then cut the fabric, and then finally click your or stitch out your finish line. Or you can use Appliqué Wonder, which is a wonderful Floriani product, to make the job easier. The way you'd use Appliqué Wonder in this instance is you would print out a line that represents your outline. It would be hidden underneath the satin stitch, and you would print that on the back of Appliqué Wonder, and then you would cut it out after pressing the Appliqué Wonder down to your applique fabric. It's a really, really cool technique, and I just love Appliqué Wonder for that. It saves all the fussy cutting in the hoop. But to do that, you actually need to have that artwork line all nice and isolated and print it out on your inkjet printer. So I'm going to show you how we would do that. So you would come up here and select your artwork, and you can't see it because it's hidden under all of this bird stuff, but you would go ahead and select it, and you would click the copy icon. Then I'm going to select a new design window, and now I'm going to paste it. All right, now I've got the fabric along with it. I can go ahead and leave that there if I want. Really won't hurt anything, but let's just go ahead and show you how to turn it off. To turn off the fabric, you would click the fabric icon one more time, come over here, select None, and click OK. That's how you turn the fabric off. Now, if we printed this out just like it was, it would be okay except for one thing. We're going to be printing on the back side of the Appliqué Wonder, so our applique would come out reversed if we did this. So we need to reverse the artwork before we print it. Very, very easy to do in MDQ2. Just simply come up here, click the flip horizontal, and that's going to reverse it. So now it'll print out perfectly. The only other thing we need to do is print it out. To do that, we would go ahead and load a piece of Appliqué Wonder into our inkjet printer. Make sure it's inkjet, and make sure you've loaded so you print on the release paper side, which is the shiny paper side, and you want to come up here and click the print icon. When you do that, you want to come to your settings, and you want to make sure that print actual size is checked. Uncheck everything else except for artwork. So this is going to make sure it prints at the actual size. You're not going to be bothered with crosshairs, hoops, stitches, anything else. Just check artwork and click OK. That gets it all set up. And then the last thing you need to do is just come here and click Print, and it will print out on your inkjet printer. And we're going to assume that you've gone ahead and done that if you're going to use Appliqué Wonder instead of using a traditional in-the-hoop appliqué technique. So that ends our software section. We're going to minimize the software. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here, and I am going to walk through the assembly instructions. Because it's not a complete project, it's actually very, very quick. So you've seen this screen, you've seen the next screen, and we're just going to go over the materials that you're going to require. I haven't made a complete list here because most of them are pretty obvious. You're going to need fabric. This is your backing fabric, the fabric your appliqué is going to go on. You also need appliqué fabric, and you need stabilizer to stabilize your base fabric with. Optionally, you can use Appliqué Wonder, and optionally, if you're going to do a traditional appliqué, you might want to get yourself some R&K embroidery perfection tape. You obviously are going to need thread, bobbin thread, scissors, all that stuff. If you're going to use a cutter, you need a cutter. All right, so we're going to get ready to embroider. Just one important note here. This file that you've saved is going to have automatic color changes in it. Those happened automatically when we put the appliqué in, so it automatically gave us the 3 colors. It does that on purpose so the machine will stop between the steps. If you have a multi-needle machine, you're going to have to manually go into your machine and put in those reserve stop commands in order to get the machine to stop, because one of the advantages, of course, of having a multi-needle is that's going to plow right through and stitch all the colors. You don't want that to happen. You want to put in those reserve stops, at least on the first 2 color changes. You don't have to change the thread color. You can leave the same thread in, or you can change it if you want. You can go ahead and use the same thread throughout. It won't matter unless you want to. Okay? Next, we're going to pre-cut our appliqué. Again, this is optional. If you have a Brother Scan and Cut, you want to put the FCM file that you saved onto a jump drive. That's also known as USB drive or USB stick. You want to plug that into the hole in your Scan and Cut where it goes, and go ahead and use the menu on the Scan and Cut to load the design into the cutter. If you have a silhouette cutter, you're going to have to do a few more steps. You're going to load that SVG file into the silhouette software. Now, one note is you must have that designer edition to save and use, or not save, but to load the SVG file into the software. It's well worth the inexpensive upgrade charge to get the designer edition, not only for SVG files, but the other stuff that goes on in the software. Then you're going to use the features of that software to create what they call a cut line so the cutter knows what to cut. Next step is to press the Appliqué Wonder onto the reverse side of your appliqué fabric. You're going to put the fabric on your cutting mat. Do not remove the backing paper, and you're going to cut your appliqué. If you're wondering why we didn't reverse the file that we saved for the SVG or for the FCM file, it's because we're cutting from the top. And because we're cutting from the top, then that is in the correct orientation, so we don't need to reverse it. If you're going to use Appliqué Wonder, you can, you're not going to use Appliqué Wonder on the cutter, but you want to use it manually. You want to go ahead and print out your outline on the reverse side of the paper using an inkjet printer. Make sure the design's reversed. So we've gone over that already. You want to press that printed piece of Appliqué Wonder onto the reverse side of your fabric, and then once it's pressed on, then you cut out your appliqué with the scissors as close to the line as possible. Now, if you want to use a traditional appliqué technique, of course, you're not going to do either of those. We'll get to that here in a second. So we're going to embroider the design now. First thing you want to do is take your stitch file that you saved, load it onto your machine, hoop up your backing fabric and stabilizer, load the hoop into the machine, and you're going to stitch out the first color, which is going to be your placement line, and the machine should stop. Then you're going to remove the hoop from the machine. If you pre-cut your applique with either your cutter or using Appliqué Wonder and the scissors, you want to remove the backing paper from the applique and stick the applique to the backing fabric using the placement line that you stitched out as a guide. If you didn't pre-cut, you're going to place your applique fabric to cover the placement line and optionally use some R&K embroidery perfection tape to secure it to the backing fabric. Just make sure you don't put the tape in the area where we're going to stitch next, and then put the hoop back in the machine. Stitch the next color, which is the tack down line, and the machine should stop once more. If you didn't pre-cut, so you're using a traditional in the hoop applique, you're going to remove the hoop from the machine and carefully trim the applique fabric as close to the tack down line as you can, and then you're going to return the hoop to the machine. If you pre-cut, your applique is already stuck down, you're obviously not going to do that step. You're just going to skip straight to stitching the remaining colors. So either way you go, you're at the last step now. Just go ahead and stitch out the remaining colors, which is going to stitch out our advanced stipple pattern along with the satin stitches to cover up the edge of the fabric, and that is going to complete the project. And that's all there is to it. I want to thank everybody for attending. The video of this should be online in a day or two if you're going to refer back to it, and we hope that you will. We hope that you will use the video along with the printed PDF instructions, which will download with that sample fabric into your MDQ projects folder like we showed you earlier. We hope you use that to recreate this applique at home. Of course, feel free to change anything you want, thread colors. You can change your fabric sample. You can change the pattern that you use from the Custom Shapes tool. You can load in your own patterns. And, of course, you can use any stipple pattern or texture pattern that you want, or leave the pattern out entirely. All totally up to you. But I want to thank everybody for attending again, and we'll see you next month with another MDQII project.
Thank you, Mark. You did an excellent job, and we look forward to seeing everyone next time. Have a great evening.